What is grand narrative, or metanarrative? The term grand narrative is also called metanarrative. In fact, the two terms mean exactly the same thing. Hence, they are used interchangeably. The term grand narrative, or metanarrative, was coined by the famous French philosopher, and forerunner of postmodernism, Jean-François Lyotard. Lyotard uses the term grand narrative, or metanarrative, to refer to a theory that tries to give a comprehensive and totalizing accounts to various historical events and experiences, as well as to social and cultural phenomena, based upon the appeal to universal truth. In other words, for Lyotard, a grand narrative, or metanarrative, is a type of storytelling, which legitimizes forms of knowledge by supplying them with a validating philosophy of history. Hence, the story, or narrative, functions to legitimize power, authority, and social customs. With this idea, a grand narrative or metanarrative is, therefore, defined as a narrative that claims to explain various events in history, and gives meaning to them by connecting disparate events and phenomena by appealing to some kind of universal knowledge or truth. Indeed, grand narratives claim to have a universal status, and to be able to explain all other narratives. They, therefore, attempt to translate alternative accounts into their own language, and to suppress all objections to what they themselves are saying. Grand narratives also organize and legitimate politics and culture by posting an origin, for example, God, or an end, for example, universal emancipation, that can supposedly organize a story without becoming part of it. For example, in the Enlightenment grand narrative, the hero of knowledge strives after the ethical political goal of universal peace. In fact, according to the Enlightenment narrative, reason will free the world from superstition and produce a universal knowledge. Democracy will make the people the subject of the universal history of humanity, and Marxism will free the proletariat through revolution. The narrative of Marxism is a concrete example of a grand narrative. As we may already know, Marxism tells the story of the heroic people's march towards socialism. Lyotard criticizes grand narratives in his work titled, The Postmodern Condition, a Report on Knowledge. According to Lyotard, grand narratives are a feature of the period of modernity. However, postmodernity's attitude towards metanarratives and universals is, in contrast, one of incredulity. In fact, Lyotard characterizes the postmodern condition as one with increasing skepticism toward the totalizing nature of metanarratives, or grand narratives. For Lyotard, therefore, the grand narratives of the past have to be rejected in favor of little narratives, or cultural representations of local or minority subjects. Like the language games of Wittgenstein, no little narrative has any privileged status or power. No one can speak all these languages, and few, it is claimed, feel any nostalgia for the lost grand narratives. Now that the energy of the universalizing Enlightenment has been exhausted, legitimation springs from localized practices and culture. However, it can obviously be argued that the story of the collapse of grand narratives is, itself, a new grand narrative. It has also been argued that this is, as Eurocentric as the grand narratives it supposedly subverts, and that it excludes the black cultures that are producing a historical memory, and a narrative of emancipation as they struggle against racism.